Lake Tahoe has a water clarity of about 70 feet deep, making it one of the clearest water bodies in the world. A body of water's clarity is closely related to the different nutrients and chemical composition found in the water. Nutrients in water are important for many different factors of riparian ecosystems, including the habitat selection of the region's waterfowl. Waterfowl need a plethora of nutrients for reproduction, migration, and survival. Bodies of water, such as Lake Tahoe, have little nutrients available to waterfowl because of the depth. Nutrient limitations can cause birds to pick other bodies of water to populate that have less clarity and therefore more nutrients. Examples of a local region's less clarity would be Alum Creek and other bodies of water in the Collin Ranch area. Let's talk a little more about waterfowl reproduction and nutrient limitations. It is a known fact amongst ornithologists that waterfowl need little during the egg synthesis stage of reproduction. However, it is not certain if this is due to lack of environmental nutrients or a biological process. There have been a few different hypotheses trying to explain nutrient limitations and their effects on clutch size of waterfowl. The three that we are going to talk about here are the egg production hypothesis, the protein limitation hypothesis, and the lipid limitation hypothesis. The egg production hypothesis is described as an evolutionary trade-off where species that laid relatively large eggs were constrained by food availability to lay smaller clutches. This is not necessarily a beneficial trade-off because there is a lessened probability that the offspring will survive. Therefore, environments with higher nutrient levels are more desirable when waterfowl are picking a nesting site. Next, we are going to explain the protein limitation hypothesis and the lipid limitation hypothesis together, as they are similar concepts. The protein and lipid limitation hypothesis suggests that the female's ability to acquire proteins and lipids at the time of reproduction is the limiting factor of clutch size. The key difference between the two is that acquiring protein is a highly environmental circumstance. Waterfowl acquire protein mostly through insects and algae. Again, insects and algae are mostly characteristic of water areas that contain some eutrophication or decreased clarity. Recently, there has been studies conducted by the University of California that provide support for the protein limitation hypothesis and the lipid limitation hypothesis. It has been concluded that the protein limitation hypothesis is a greater limiting factor because it is an environmental factor. That said, there is no universal hypothesis for how nutrient availability limits the clutch size and survivorship of waterfowl hatchlings. Nutrients in the environment have a positive and negative effect on waterfowl, but how do waterfowl affect wetland ecology? Because aggregations of waterfowl are migrating to wetland areas that are nutrient abundant, there are negative environmental consequences. Erosion, disease, and decreased water clarity are becoming more prevalent in wetlands used for waterfowl habitat. Waterfowl will move large quantities of nutrients from farm fields to make their nests in riparian areas, disturbing the riparian ecosystem. Also, bird excrement contains phosphorus and nitrates that run off into the water. Bird-borne nutrients supplied 40% of nitrogen and 75% of the phosphorus that enter the primary wetland for roosting. Because wetland area is becoming scarce, it is becoming harder and harder to overcome nutrient loading due to migratory bird roosting. The Hunter Creek watershed is an example of desirable waterfowl habitat. It contains a level of nutrients that is needed to support waterfowl survival and reproduction. But what does this mean for the Hunter Creek watershed? Is there enough space to support humans and birds?